Today, we're going to go into a little bit more depth with the Mayan social structure. Last week we talked about the Mayan government, wherein there was a king who ruled kind of in like the capital city, and then he or she um, would tell certain friends, family, successful warriors to rule the other cities. And so those people were called nobles. And then the nobles would choose officials to run certain parts of the city. So the king chose the noble to run one of his faraway cities. That noble would choose his friends or family or, close relatives to run the police or find an economic structure that worked in that city. They would kind of divvy up the responsibilities within that city. We also talked about how most Mayans were farmers, and for the most part, um, everything was set pretty much that way. You had the king, you had nobles, and you had kind of everybody else. But you can get into more depth, especially when talking about the social structure, which sort of piggybacks off of government positions. Social structure, first off, is how people are organized socially or culturally. For example, in the US, we have a middle class, an upper class, and a lower class, and all of that basically depends on how much money the parents or the household makes. Now, you can marry into an upper class or a lower class family if you're in the middle class. We think that the largest class is the middle class. Um, and there are certain things like if you're lower class, you might not have a car. Oftentimes, the middle class can be defined by how many bathrooms are in your house. So there are loose ways to identify the three classes for the US. But the social structure of the Maya was really rigid. Occupations for Mayan men was limited to their father's occupation. So if your father was a farmer, you were going to be a farmer. If your father made bricks, you were going to make bricks. There were some exceptions, but they were pretty rare. Women, as we spoke about, could be involved in government, economics, and religion, as well as their responsibilities for home and family. But just like the men, Mayan women could not marry outside of their social class. The strictness of the Maya social structure is called a caste system. Even today, there are caste systems that exist. India has one of the most strict caste systems, even though the government has officially banned it. Most people in India still think of their social system as a caste system. It's a very rigid social system in which you are born into a social position and cannot leave that position. In a caste system, you're required to marry within your own caste. A caste is kind of like a level. The upper level was composed of those rulers, nobles, and priests that we've already talked about. The middle caste, or the middle level, were businessmen, merchants, and soldiers, and the very bottom rung of the social class was made up of farmers and slaves. As we already know, each city had a ruling family, and that family lived a life of luxury. During religious ceremonies, rulers wore headdresses that were taller than they were. Rulers held hereditary positions, which means that their power was passed down through their family. Sons inherited their right to rule from their fathers. The only way a new ruling family could take over their city would be by war. This is one reason fights and wars between Mayan cities were common. Mayan ruling families had three tasks: to command armies, make laws, and hold religious ceremonies. Many of those ruling families chose priesthood if they knew that they weren't the next in line for the throne. So even if you knew that you weren't going to be ruling the city that the king told your family to rule, you still had better options than a farmer, for example, because priests still had a lot of power in ancient Mayan history. Slaves who were enemy captives, for example, if um, the city of Itzmana overtook the city of Utsal, then the Utsal slaves were enemy captives, criminals, or poor people who sold themselves into slavery.